Chapter 171. Lauren shouted anxiously, "Harrison, come back!" Just as she said this, Harrison had already rushed into the villa's living room. Hubert and Rooney were hiding in the distance, crying their hearts out. Looking at the big fire in front of her, Helena was angry. Who was it? Who was so malicious as to want to wipe out the entire Lewises? Suddenly, there was a sound of abrupt braking. A red Maserati screeched to a halt by the roadside. Nash and Hira quickly hurried to Lauren's side. "Please be okay. Please be okay." Lauren was as nervous as a cat on a hot tin roof. Although she usually mocked Harrison, all that was to spur his fighting spirit. At this critical juncture, she was more anxious than anyone else. "Mom!" Hira choked out a cry. Seeing her daughter coming over, the tough Lauren could not help but hug her and burst into tears. Hira also could not help crying, and the mother and daughter hugged each other tightly. Meanwhile, Nash glanced around at the scene. The ground was littered with the bodies of the Lewis's hired bodyguards. Doctors and nurses in white coats were struggling to save the survivors. "Mom, where's Dad?" Hira did not see her father's figure and choked out a question. Only then did Lauren react and hurriedly say to Nash, "The old man is still in the villa, and Harrison went in to save him." Nash turned his head to look at the main villa, and a glint flashed in his eyes. That was when he saw Harrison trapped between the stairs of the second and third floors. The scorching high temperatures seemed to have sucked away all the air in the villa. Harrison's clothes were already baked dry and even caught fire. Looking at the big fire in the stairwell, he gritted his teeth and rushed in. After getting to the third floor, he saw that the old man's door had already fallen to the ground. The walls were severely damaged, and the room was engulfed in a sea of fire. "Dad!" Harrison roared with reddened eyes. Although his father had always favored his older brother, he was still his biological father, after all. With such a big fire, he feared his father would not escape this calamity. Tears blurred his vision, and his heart was filled with sorrow and despair. "Cough, cough, Hari." A muffled, weak call came from the room. Hearing his father's voice, Harrison was shocked and rushed into the room without hesitation. "Dad! Where are you, Dad?" The smoke from the burning bedding made it impossible for Harrison to even open his eyes. Under the desk, a man on fire stood up. He was holding an iron box in his arms. Staggering toward Harrison, he gritted his teeth and yelled, "Harrison, give this box to Nash." After saying that, he threw the box out with force before falling to the ground. "Dad!" Harrison let out another hysterical scream. The four walls were making cracking sounds under the scorching fire. Harrison quickly moved forward, patting the fire on Harrison's body with his clothes that had already dried. With a loud boom, a wall collapsed. A strong wind blew into the room, bringing with it a fierce wave of heat and flames. Just then, an upright figure stood in front of Harrison. Ripples were faintly emanating from that figure, and it actually managed to resist the flames roaring like a primordial beast. Chapter 172. Flames flowed like terrifying waves along the ceiling toward the door. The enormous impact toppled the walls. Harrison saw Nash standing in front of him, blocking the flames. He was instantly shocked. "Nashi, why did you come in too?" His father was trapped in the fire, so he had to come in. Even if he could not get out, at least he could repay his father for his upbringing. Nonetheless, Nash was different. He was Hira's boyfriend, and the two were not married yet. If anything happened to Nash, how would he explain this to Hira? Nash looked at the unrecognizable old man and felt as if something was blocking his throat. The ceiling began to fracture, and the burning chandelier was about to fall. Cracks began spreading like spider webs on all four walls. In the searing heat, there was a pungent stench. Nash frowned and immediately shouted, "Let's go, hurry!" Harrison wanted to help his father up, but he was already oxygen deprived and could not muster any more strength. Enduring the intense pain all over his body, Herman muttered through gritted teeth, "The box, my box." Harrison quickly picked up his father's iron box. "Dad, here's the box." At that moment, Nash heard the sound of an electronic timer coming from the wardrobe. His pupils contracted sharply, and his inner energy began to surge wildly. His body emitted a wide glow as he swiftly grabbed the two of them and rushed out of the villa. A deafening explosion resounded. The tallest villa in the Lewis family's estate exploded once again. Glass fragments and shattered wall debris scattered everywhere. Jupiter shouted, "Get down! Quickly get down! Cover your heads with your hands." Everyone lay down on the ground covering their heads. "Mom, be careful." Hera saw fragments of a window flying toward them. Panicked, she quickly pushed her mother to the ground. After a while, they stared blankly at the villa that was reduced to 2 floors. Harrison! Lauren's lips trembled as she called her husband's name. At that moment, she felt her world crumbling down. Her heart ached as if it were pierced by 1,000 arrows. Nash! Hera looked at the sea of fire in despair. Her mind was blank, and she had lost all ability to think. In the distance, Helena silently watched the collapsed ruins. Nash, who she despised the most, might have been engulfed by the fire, but she just could not feel happy about it. Stricken with grief, Hubert closed his eyes. "Dad, Harrison, rest in peace." He knew his father was trapped in the villa, but he did not have Harrison's courage to rush in to rescue him. While he was glad he survived, he felt a twinge of pain in his heart. He fought with Harrison just to gain control of the Lewis's resources, and such family infighting happened in every large family. Now, witnessing the death of his father and younger brother, he felt extremely distressed. Great. Nash is dead too. They deserve to die. They all deserve to die. Rooney no longer shed crocodile tears and had a gloating smile on her chubby face. Hubert slapped Rooney across the face, shouting, "Shut up!" Rooney was stunned by Hubert's slap, and she covered her face in disbelief. How dare you hit me?" Hubert had always been tolerant of Rooney, before and after their marriage. Chapter 173. Usually it was Rooney who initiated the violence, but today she found herself slapped by Hubert. Having been hit at the Chateau Hotel tonight and now again, Rooney could not stand it anymore and immediately lunged to scratch Hubert's face. Suddenly, there was a sound from the ruins in front of the villa. A ragged Nash helped Harrison up, and then the two found Herman, who was charred from the rubble. "Quick! The stretcher!" Mr. Dean shouted at several of the nurses. They immediately ran over with the stretcher. Many of the injured were losing too much blood and needed to be rushed to the hospital for a transfusion. The hospital simply did not have enough ambulances, so Jupiter asked his team to use patrol cars to transport the wounded. It was 3 o'clock in the morning at Johnford People's Hospital. Mr. Dean called over all the attending physicians to treat the injured Lewises. Herman had burns covering more than 90% of his body, multiple organ failure, and symptoms of fibrosis in his lungs. All the experts in the hospital were at a loss. Nash had temporarily saved Herman from death's door using divine needles. "Dr. Yarborough, Dr. Langdon, you two watch over old Lewis' oxygen supply." Mr. Dean arranged for 2 elderly senior directors to personally look after Herman. Looking at Herman's unrecognizable face covered by the oxygen mask, Nash felt a sense of unease. Herman had inhaled a large amount of toxic gas, causing multiple organ failure. His lung ulcers accelerated fibrosis, and he could only rely on oxygen to maintain his breathing now. Mr. Dean asked in confusion, "Dr. Calcraft, what exactly is wrong with old Lewis?" He had seen countless burn victims, but he had never seen a patient with complete internal organ failure like Herman. Nash sighed. The source of the explosion carried a kind of toxin. If too much is ingested, it can put all the internal organs at risk. Earlier, when saving Herman, he had smelled a pungent, metallic smell. It was likely the poisonous gas that led to Herman's organ failure. Mr. Dean took a deep breath. "So, the other patients are also?" Nash nodded. "Those rescued from the house won't last till tomorrow." Upon hearing this, Mr. Dean's heart sank. "Even you can't do anything about this?" Nash did not reply but turned and walked outside the intensive care unit. If it was just the initial poisoning, there might be ways to treat it. However, Herman's organs had been completely destroyed by the poisonous gas. Even if his master were here, he would probably be helpless. Outside in the lobby, the governor of Johnford, Jade, and Henderson had arrived. They were comforting Harrison's and Hubert's families. Zachariah from the Martial Arts Association had also arrived with his granddaughter, Scotty. Of the 5 elites, only Joseph and his daughter Olivia were here. Scotty and Bianca were comforting the tearful Hira. Seeing Nash come out, everyone looked eagerly at him. Harrison stood up from the ground and hurriedly approached, asking, "Nashy, how's Dad doing?" Nash pursed his dry lips. The words he had prepared earlier stuck in his throat. Harrison already had a guess about what Nash would say. Darkness seemed to envelop him as he fell straight forward. Nash caught Harrison and grabbed his wrist to check his pulse. Seeing that it was normal, he let out a slight sigh of relief. "Nash, is my dad okay?" Hira's eyes were swollen from crying as she came over and asked. Her voice was choked and slightly hoarse. Nash gently replied, "Mr. Harrison will be fine. He just needs to rest for a while." Lauren came over and took Harrison from Nash while choking back on her tears. "I'll take care of Harrison. You go check on the other patients." At this moment, a group of emergency doctors came to report to Mr. Dean about the condition of their patients. After hearing their reports, Mr. Dean felt a tremor in his heart. Not a single one survived. Chapter 174. More than a dozen doctors kept their heads low in silence. Apart from those who were outside the villa, the lightly wounded bodyguards managed to scrape through with their lives. The Lewises who were in the villa, however, had a large amount of toxins in their blood and were already suffering from severe poisoning on the way to the hospital. Despite employing all sorts of resuscitation methods, they were unable to save their lives. Governor Jade called for an emergency meeting using the hospital's office. Nash also attended this meeting. Mr. Dean was the one reporting on the casualties of the Lewis family members. Hubert's and Harrison's families are all safe. Herman is in a coma from severe injuries, and it's estimated he won't survive until tomorrow morning. All other members of the Lewis family have died. 29 of the Lewis's hired bodyguards have also died. The faces of everyone in the meeting room were heavy. Jade slammed the table in anger. "This is a premeditated, vicious terrorist attack. We must bring these murderous devils to justice." Such a significant event happening under his jurisdiction had already severely affected his future. If he did not handle this matter well, he would not be able to explain it to the entire Johnford and the Lewises. Henderson nodded and said, "I'll establish a special task force right away." Outside the meeting room, Angelica wanted to enter but was stopped by 2 patrollers. "Angelica, the governor-in-chief are having a meeting." "I know, but I have important things to report." Angelica shook the sealed bag in her hand, which contained a metal tube as thick as a thumb. Her expression was dark. "What is this?" "This is a detonator I found at the site of the Lewis family's estate," Angelica explained without any expression. "Angelica, you take that thing away now. The governor is in the meeting room. What if this thing explodes?" The 2 almost wet their pants. If she were not a fellow co-worker, they might have already taken action. Angelica frowned. "This is a dud," one of the patrollers reprimanded seriously. "Even a dud is not acceptable. Go away, or don't blame us for what we'll do next." "Fine. I'll wait for the chief outside." Angelica reluctantly turned around. The 2 patrollers breathed a sigh of relief. However, just as they let their guard down, Angelica suddenly made a quick turn and in a few steps crossed their defense line. Before the 2 had time to react, Angelica had already barged into the meeting room. "Angelica, this is outrageous." The 2 patrollers even drew their guns. It was clear they were serious now. The people in the meeting room were shocked by the scene. Henderson looked at Angelica, and his brows furrowed in anger. "Which team are you from? What are you doing?" As he spoke, he glared fiercely at the 2 patrollers. They could not even guard a door. Were they trying to make him lose face in front of the governor? Angelica held up the plastic bag and said, "I have a report for the chief. My name is Angelica White, and I'm a member of the 9th team. I'm here to report an important situation." The 2 male patrollers were pale with fright from looking at the sealed bag. Henderson was very angry now. He slammed the table and roared, "Can't you see I'm in a meeting? Didn't your team leader teach you any rules?" Without waiting for Angelica to speak, he said to the 2 male team members, "What are you 2 doing? You can't even guard a door. Get her out now." The 2 male patrollers walked up to Angelica, one on each side, and held her arms. Chapter 175. Hold on. Just as they were about to escort Angelica out, Nash suddenly spoke up. The two male patrollers paused slightly, then looked toward Henderson. Henderson was also confused, but he did not dare to defy Nash and gestured for the two to let go. Nash looked at the sealed bag in Angelica's hand and asked, "Did you find it at the Lewis family's estate?" Angelica gratefully glanced at Nash and then nodded while saying, "Yes. This is a highly explosive black tech detonator. Although small in size, it's extremely powerful, and it also contains highly toxic substances." Henderson's face turned pale almost instantly, and he stammered anxiously, Why did you bring this here? Get it out of here." Bringing such a dangerous object into the conference room was disastrous. If it exploded, they would all be killed on the spot. He had already made up his mind to fire Angelica after the meeting. Angelica quickly explained, "This detonator is damaged. It won't explode." She would naturally not dare to carry around a threatening detonator. Only after confirmation from her colleagues in the bomb disposal team did she dare to bring the detonator to the chief and the governor. Henderson yelled again, "Well, isn't it poisonous? Get it out! Get it out!" He felt his authority was greatly undermined. Angelica swallowed. The poison in the explosive only works when it's heated to produce gas. Henderson was furious and slammed the table. "Can't you understand what I'm saying? I told you to get out. Right now. Get out." At this point, Nash continued, "Do you know this type of detonator well?" His gentle voice contrasted sharply with Henderson's angry outburst. Nonetheless, this soft voice somehow overpowered Henderson's. Seeing Nash's intention to let Angelica stay, Henderson had no choice but to say to Jade, "Governor, for your safety, we should leave first." Jade lightly said, "I trust her. If she says the detonator won't explode, then we're definitely safe. Maybe the detonator in her hand is the key to your case." Henderson sighed helplessly, then obediently sat back in his chair. He took out his phone and notified HR to revoke Angelica's patroller status. Angelica gratefully glanced at Nash and then began to speak. "My ex-boyfriend used to work in a mercenary group. He once showed me this kind of detonator and told me that this technology is only available in their group." Nash took a sip of water from his cup on the table and asked calmly, "Which mercenary group did your ex-boyfriend work for?" "Sky Blade Group." Angelica pursed her lips. The mention of this mercenary group reminded her of her ex-boyfriend, and she had a complicated look on her face. She and her ex-boyfriend were childhood sweethearts. The two had a sense of justice since they were young, and they also decided to go to the police academy together in the future. The two applied, and they received an admission notice from the Captain Police Academy. It was just that the man disappeared the day before school started. It was not until Angelica was about to graduate that the man contacted her again. By that time, he was already a top mercenary known throughout the mercenary world. The two dated again for a while. However, she later found out that the man had forgotten his original goals. He would do anything for profit and often appeared in extremely dangerous war zones. She tried to persuade him to leave Skyblade, but he had his own ideas. In the end, they chose to break up. So, I suspect that Skyblade is behind this. Even if it's not Skyblade, it must have a great deal to do with the group," Angelica stated firmly. She did not care whatever Skyblade did out there. However, now that it had severely threatened the Order of Johnford, she felt compelled to seek justice for the dead. Nash asked, "Can you contact your ex-boyfriend?"